can I ask you a question I've always wanted to ask? And
Yeah.
I've got to talk to Deadmau5 and a couple of other big DJs, but I've never really had the I never asked it, and I'm going to ask it. And it's a dumb question, I think, but like it's something I think about a lot, which is when you are on stage by yourself, behind your console, and you have like 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people flipping out in front of you and moving and dancing and spinning and I guess, how does that feel? Isn't that a strange feeling?
Yeah, I mean, the way always say it is like, if I like slept well and ate well that day and like feel great, then it's like the best thing ever, because it's like, as long as I feel physically well, then the whole thing for me is like the most amazing experience ever. But then there's like, sometimes if I didn't sleep well or didn't eat like well or enough that day or anything, then a lot of anxiety gets kind of put at the forefront. So it's hard for me to even be like super present sometimes, because like I'm so anxious of like not even like messing up, but just more so I'm anxious about like feeling bad, like how I feel like physically because of like the like touring and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, it's obviously very, very, very amazing and crazy and chaotic to play in front of that many people. I feel like it never stops being insane, like every single time I do it, I'm like, this is like so insane.
But you are able to be present sometimes. Like I was curious about
For
where you
sure.
go in your mind during that, but you're able to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm able to be present a lot of the time, but like there's also been many times where I haven't been able to be present. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just me being honest, like there's been some times where I've just been like so in my head as well. It kind of like depends, because like I feel like as a DJ too, like you're doing less crazy stuff most of the time than like most, like if you're a performer, like singer, or like in a band, like I feel like you're like, it's a lot more like,
Well,
you
this
know
is
what
what
I
I
mean?
mean. This is what I'm curious about, because when you're a singer and you have 50,000 people in front of you, you can like be Axl Rose and like run across the
Yeah.
stage or something like that. But you're just kind of staying
Yeah.
still,
Exactly.
you know?
There's a lot more, there's definitely sometimes more time of like nothingness while you're on stage as a DJ. Not all the time, obviously, but just like there's moments of that. And in, like I said, on the best days, I'm able to be like super present and just like enjoy the whole thing and love it, have a sip of my beer or something, and just like, you know what I mean? But like then there's other times where it's like, I don't know, so like sometimes it's hard to feel physically well while like being a touring artist, you know what I mean? Like,
For
yeah.
sure. I mean, and like I said, I want to talk a little bit about what the effect that has on you. I'm so glad you're finally talking about it. But I want to start at kind of the beginning with you. So you
Sure.
started DJing for other people at a really young age, right? Like, what's the
Yeah.
story there?
Yeah, so I started DJing when I was like 14, and I would like DJ at high school dances and like random bars. I like DJed at like a Ruth's Chris steakhouse once. Like I DJed at like so many random things, and like I've also played to like 0 people. I've played to like 10 people, like, and I just kind of, at first I was just doing it I mean, for fun. Like I didn't really have it in mind to be like my career when I first started DJing. Like I wasn't like, oh, this is what I want to do forever. It was more like, this is just like fun and cool for now, you know what I mean? And I really had like a lot of music that I wanted to play at the time. And yeah, that was that. But it was when I was 18 that I started making music. And then I was like, oh, I actually want to do this as like a career, because I wanted to play my music, you know?
What I find interesting about that is that, like, I had a lot of friends who, when we were in when we were in high school, I should say, downloaded or like early versions of what is now Ableton, and like downloaded like, and bought super simple consoles and stuff like that, and they were just kind of doing stuff in their bedroom. But I think it's like interesting to be 14 and 15 and 16 years old and to like want to be doing it for people, to like be playing clubs and underground clubs and parties and stuff like that. It's an interesting way, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's just, yeah, like I said, I think I just got, or like I got kind of influenced musically by certain people that I was associated with at that early age, and got introduced to things like just like Justice,
Yeah.
and like just so many artists that a lot of people didn't really know of at my age, like around the groups that I was like hanging out with. They were all into like pop music and stuff, and I was into this like electronic music, and like not many people were, at least that I was around, and I just kind of felt like playing that music for people, like that was kind of like I wanted to just DJ, and like I wanted to just be the person that was like curating like the music for certain events,
Yeah, like you had this music you really loved that the people who you were hanging out with didn't know so well. And then this is an opportunity for you to like show it to them, to be like, check out how good this is. Check out how good like a night can be with this music.
Yeah, seriously. That was basically exactly that. And that was fun for a while. And then I did that for a while, and then at like 17, I remember I DJed like a couple more times at these like random underground like raves and parties in Toronto. But after that, I took like a break from it because it was like it was like very exhausting at that time, because I had to like take a bus by myself from like Niagara Falls to Toronto, and like never had a place to stay. Would like I ended up staying at some like random like person's house that I barely knew. Like it was kind of like just like a sketchy situation after a while. And so I was like, I'm just gonna like take a break from this. And when I did take a break, then it was like 6-7 months later that I started making music. And then I was like, I wanted to revisit it again.
So when you start making music, all of a sudden like something clicks for you then, right? Like something,
Yeah, because like the thing was like I loved DJing, but I was passionate about making music. Like it was like I don't feel like necessarily passionate about making music, or sorry, about DJing as I do like I am with making music. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where my passion is. So, but I knew that I had to revisit DJing again immediately once I started making music, because I was like, oh wow, now I can't wait to go play my music. And then I got like passionate to like have both combined. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's so beautiful. By the way, is it ever sketchy being 16 and 17 years old playing underground raves and parties and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. Like I remember like going to like the bathroom and like seeing people just like doing drugs like everywhere. I mean, people obviously do that now all the time, and like different, raves and parties and shows and stuff too. But I'm not really like exposed to it now. And even if I was, it wouldn't be like a big deal. But like at that age,
I was a kid, like, right?
Yeah, I was like, what is happening?
Am I safe? Am I going to be all right?
No, seriously though.
I bet. So then things start to get picked up when you get signed to Mousetrap, Canadian record label started by a fellow Canadian DJ, Canadian music legend at this point, deadmau5. And I know this is really meaningful to you. Talk to me a little bit about how deadmau5 became sort of like a bit of a guiding light in your career, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember seeing deadmau5 perform when I was like 15, 16. No, I was like 16 probably. And I remember just being very attracted to the certain sounds that he was making in a way that was like, he just used I remember I knew nothing about music at the time, like music production and stuff, but all I could say about deadmau5 that was different than other artists was I found such a crispness and clarity in his sounds that I didn't hear before. And I was like, that sounds so pleasant, like on the ear, like just like all of his kicks and snares and everything. And like the way his music made me feel was like, I felt very, very almost hypnotized by his sound. And it definitely was my number one influence and inspiration to like want to make music on my own, you know what I mean? Like before that, it was like, yeah, I love this artist. For example, I loved Skrillex. I loved Zed's Dead. I loved like so many bands growing up, but like none of them quite made me like want to open my computer and make the music, except for once I really pay attention to deadmau5. So ironically, we're both from Niagara Falls, which is just insane. Although him being from Niagara Falls has no correlation to like why I respect and like loved his music. That's just a coincidence, you know, like whether we lived in the same spot or not, I would have still been super inspired by his music and stuff. But yeah, and then getting my music signed to Mousetrap was like definitely a massive deal. For him to even have listened to my music was like a big deal. And I ended up like doing some shows with him and all sorts of stuff, and it's been pretty amazing, honestly.
I know what you mean. Like his music is great, and it has nothing to do with the fact that you're both from Niagara Falls. It is really interesting to me that these two sort of like powerhouses of electronic music in the world, who happen to come from Canada, happen to come from like a 15-minute drive from one another.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely really insane. It's definitely insane. Like, and a massive coincidence, I guess.
Maybe there's something. Maybe there's something in the water in Niagara Falls that we don't. Maybe we should go like check out the water filtering plant or something like that. Let's talk a little bit about the stuff we were talking about before. So, I mean, you spent years at this point making your own music and touring the world for millions of fans. Before we get to like the sustainability stuff and we're going to talk about that. Just like, what's one thing about being like a world famous DJ that no one prepares you for?
I mean, definitely just the touring and how challenging that can be. I think that's the number one thing. Because like when I was like when I was like 18 and like making music before I started touring, I was like so eager and excited, like can't wait to tour, can't wait to do that. Don't get me wrong, it's like amazing in a lot of ways. Like I cannot stress it enough. It's amazing in a lot of ways, but I just don't think anyone could have prepared me for like how how exhausting and draining the like touring and traveling as much as artists do, and also longevity and how and just how like you have to just be so consistent, like you know becoming successful in the music industry is definitely challenging in itself, but I think longevity and sustaining that is a whole other thing. You know what I mean? And I don't think anyone can really prepare you for that because the industry is constantly changing, and things are trends, and trends fade and come and go. And of course, I don't suggest anyone should ever just like follow any trends. Like I most certainly never did that in my career in any way, but yeah, it's just that kind of stuff you can't really prepare for. And yeah, I would say that that would be my answer.
I heard a thing about you one time that, and I never really thought about this. So like people should know that there are like programs you guys use that the DJs use when you're playing these like, again, massive 20, 30,000, 40,000 venue cap venues, and that these software programs can crash while you're on stage in front of all these people. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially the artists that are using like so many insane like items on stage. I used to even just use my laptop, and I used to use like Tractor, and like that I had many issues with. But then when I made the change to CDJs, that was definitely a lot more I don't know, it was more functional and more reliable.
Did that ever happen to you though? Have you ever had like a piece of software crash while you've been on stage? And
Oh, yeah, I've definitely had that happen. I've definitely had that happen many times. Yeah. Not like
what do you do?
it's actually okay. I shouldn't say I've had it happen many times, but like I've definitely had it happen like a handful of times, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, when I was like first starting to DJ internationally, I was playing at Tomorrow World at the time in Atlanta, and my CDJs had like the biggest crash ever. Like it was like honestly a disaster. And at the time, I was just like, thankfully there wasn't that many people in the crowd because it was like I was just starting out, so it was like not a big deal. But there was one time I was about to headline a show in Seattle and for like 10,000 people, right? And I'm like, I walk on stage. I'm already very nervous to go on stage, whatever. And I walk on, and my intro's playing, like my intro track. And as soon as the bass hits, all the music cut out. Everything shut off. So literally my first track. And it's so funny because in that moment, I actually analyzed how I felt. And it was like, it always, it always feels like the fear of something happening is a lot worse than it actually happening a lot of the time, like the fear of it is like, oh, this better not happen, this better not happen. But then it happens, and it's like I actually kind of laughed a little bit. I was like, this is just funny, like like I couldn't take it too seriously, because like if I was gonna sit there and be like, oh, and like start like swearing, getting all like angry, like that would just like be even worse, you know what I mean, for me, for everyone involved. So instead I just like laughed about it and was like on the mic, I was like, well, let's just try this, like try this again, like had to just like restart the whole thing. And it's like basically my point is like, of course it's not an ideal situation, and I would not prefer that happen, but when it does occasionally sometimes happen, I kind of find that it also brings like this weird connection with you and the audience, and they kind of like it in a way. It's like, oh, like they all get excited when like someone messes up, or like there's like a train wreck on stage. It's like this like moment of like authenticity and just like the reality of like life's occasional failures that just happen, you know? And I've kind of been learning to definitely it just accept that if it happens sometimes. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen if it were to happen all the time it'd be like problematic. But like sometimes it's kind of like I mean, I've seen some of my favorite artists in the world perform, and when I see them kind of mess up, it makes me like love them more, kind of like it's like kind of funny. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that
Yeah.
audiences crave a bit of authenticity. They crave a lot of authenticity. And
Yeah.
that if everything kind of if your laptop crashes while you're playing to 10, 20,000 people, they know what it's like for their laptop to crash at like an opportune moment. So
Yeah,
it's a
for
beautiful, you
sure.
know, it's a beautiful thing. You've been open, you've been even open so far in this conversation about like the realities of touring and like the sustainability of trying to be an artist right now. And I know you've been talking a little bit about your struggles with insomnia, and which is an interesting, because also people should know that quite often you would perform at night, like you would perform often late at
Yeah.
night. When did that start for you? When did the insomnia start?
In my life, the only time I've ever experienced it was in like very understandable situations. Like for example, like if I was like super anxiety, like had so much anxiety because of something, you know, or you're very upset. Like you know those nights when you're like very upset about something, like something happened in your life and you like don't sleep at all that night.
Yep.
That was like that's very normal, you know. I feel like that's relatable and like understandable. But when it got kind of got a little bit even this part here is a little bit normal. Like the first time I ever experienced serious insomnia, I got like pretty mad, like insane about it was when I went to China and like the time change. So time change is another very understandable reason for like insomnia to happen because of course you're in a different place around the world, like especially in China, like 12-hour difference, like you know that was very frustrating. Then like my internal body clock got so mixed up and messed up that my body had a hard time falling asleep, period. Like it didn't matter what time it was anymore. It was like I was just like running days without it because my body was just so confused, you know. And that was very difficult. However, that only lasted like a couple days because that only lasted while I was like in China. Then I ended up finding a little bit of a flow to it, and that never happened again, and it was fine. Like until early 2022, which obviously this year, where I randomly, in the comfort of my own home, got slammed with this like crazy insomnia that I never experienced in my life, where it was like I didn't have to be on the road for it to be happening. I was like just simply unable to sleep at night. It was like really crazy. Like up until like 7 in the morning, I'd be up. I'd be like, why can't I sleep? Then I'd fall asleep for like 2 hours, 3 hours. That's it. And it was so consistent that way. And I don't think that necessarily had to do with like being on the road. It had to do with an accumulation of buildup of stress and anxiety, stress, anxiety, and fear and perhaps dread surrounding this big tour that I was about to go on after having a lot of downtime during the pandemic, that I became very comfortable with having a lot of time off. And I am naturally definitely more of a homebody. I love being home. I love working on music. I would rather be chilling working on music than like literally anything, you know? And so getting then thrown back into the world post pandemic, I think the sort of all of that buildup, you know, of like the anxiety and everything, I think it then turned the way that my body handled that stress was in like through insomnia. You know, some people don't eat, some people eat more, some people lose their hair, some people, we know what I mean, when they're very stressed or very, you know, and stuff like that. For me, this time around was unique because for the first time in my life, I experienced this like very like prolonged period of insomnia, and that was how yeah, that was how my body reacted to it, you know. And it was, yeah, it was very it was a life-changing experience for me, honestly.
Did you change something about yourself after that? Because I have to say that like the knowing as many musicians as I do, the in particular the life of the EDM artist, the people I've met, is not the healthiest lifestyle in the world. You know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And there's a lot I've changed since then, but the main thing that I've changed is that I know my limits in regards to how many shows I will accept, and that, you know, it's fine to say no and pass on opportunities, even though they're such big opportunities that people would think you're insane for saying no to some opportunities, but you just like literally have to at some point, you know? And it's like the thing that's interesting too about like burnout is that sometimes it can happen out of nowhere, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
you'll be like going and going and like you think you're fine and all is like fine, but then all of a sudden the accumulation of like the exhaustion, the accumulation of like the stress
Yeah.
that you felt here and the stress that you felt there and all this stuff, it all of a sudden slaps you, you know? So sometimes when people say like, but don't burn yourself out, it's actually an interesting thing when I hear that, because it's like it's not really like your choice in a way while you're already like on the roll of like working and stuff. It just kind of happens. Like you just like all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's my limit. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, and so that's kind of like what definitely happened for me, or like definitely late 2019 before the pandemic. I was already very burnt out, and then during the pandemic I was like chilling, but then after it like all hit me at once, you know what I'm saying? And and yeah, that's basically that.
What about while you're on the road? Are there things you've had to adjust, like lifestyle
Yeah,
things when you're on the road, or?
for sure. I mean, I barely drink alcohol when I'm on the road. I mean, you know, maybe a beer or two max some nights, you know what I'm saying? But for the most part, definitely. I mean, I've never really been like a massive drinker on the road anyways. Like that's never really been the problem for me. Like of course if you drink a bunch of alcohol, wake up next day, you're going to feel terrible. But that wasn't my that wasn't my problem with touring. Of course, that would be a self issue. That's like I
Yeah.
did that to myself.
Yeah.
However, the nature of touring in general is exhausting. You know, sometimes it's impossible to make your flight routing be one of which that you had a restful night. Like sometimes you have to wake up at 5, 6 in the morning and head to the airport to head to your next place, right? There's a lot of things that I have changed though, where nowadays I'm really trying to make my flights a lot like later, and also I'm trying to like go to bed earlier and like not hang out with anyone, like not hang with a bunch of people like after the shows or like anything like that. Or also I have my tour manager always bring me my like tour rider, so like all my like fruits, vegetables, and like food items, and you know, my like Gatorade, water, all that is in my room before the show even happens. Like I already have that, so as soon as I get to my hotel I get to like already kind of start nourishing myself throughout the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely more intentional about taking care of like my hydration and like stuff like that, you know?
Well, I'm glad you're able to have more of a healthy lifestyle, because it also strikes me that you don't have a bass player or you know, you're like, it's just you. You're the one responsible for all of these people, and I can only imagine the pressure on you. Not too long ago, you were featured in a documentary called Underplayed about women working in electronic music. And in it, you refer to some dumb assumptions people have made about you as a woman, as a female DJ. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think it's definitely gotten a lot better over the years in regards to the amount of women that are in the scene. I definitely think there's been like quite an influx, which has been great to see. But without question, in the past, especially, you know, even just 7, 8 years ago, and especially before that, I think there was just like a very heavy like lack of women representation, and maybe a lot of women were afraid perhaps to get involved, not get taken seriously. And I think when I started, I think I don't know if I didn't get taken seriously necessarily, but there was definitely like a lot of men that were very quick to sort of like anytime I'd like post my song on like Toronto Rave Community or like Toronto Producers Group, it was like this online Facebook group. There would be like definitely a lot of men just like commenting on it, being like, this is trash, like this is that, like, you know what I mean? Or like being like, well, you could have done this better, you could have done this, but like just so much. Like they were like very quick to like hop on and like kind of like almost attack me in a way, especially comparatively to like other people that were posting in the group at the time, like other men. But thankfully I definitely was not super bothered by that, at least not consciously. However, there were moments that it did leak in still, where like, you know, I'd be about to perform in Toronto and I'd be thinking about like, oh, all those like people that were like talking on
Right.
me, like specifically in Toronto, they're going to be in this crowd, so it caused like a little bit of like extra anxiety, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, since then, I think a lot of the key to kind of solving more of this issue is just to like hopefully inspire a lot of other women to like continue to work on their music, and you know, and get a lot of people that have control of like festival lineups to make their lineups more diverse. And that's what I also try to do in my own sort of world with my own shows, is like have the lineups be a little bit more diverse and have a lot of like, you know, other women. And yeah.
I know that you're a pretty private person, and so I really do appreciate you really making the time to talk to us and open up about this. But I also know you've been opening up a little bit lately in general. Like you've opened up about your struggles with insomnia, about the lack of sustainability as a touring artist, about what what's done to your mental health, what it's kind of done to you. You've also opened up about your identity as a queer person. What has been making it easier for you to open up?
I think honestly, after I've experienced the very intense low mentally, 2022, early 2022, it really opened up my mind in a lot of ways that I never thought it could be open, perhaps. Like, I just really understand, like, if people are, it's not that I never had, it's not that I didn't have like empathy for this previously, of course, but it's just more like my empathy levels and my understanding is a lot more broad now, and like especially having experienced like severe lows. That I should mention that previously I had never experienced stuff like this before. I was always a very optimistic, happy person, fortunate in a lot of ways, at least fortunate in my own mind. It's not even that I had like a super wealthy family or like any connections. It wasn't even that. Just I had a very fortunately healthy mind for the majority of my life until this happened. And so when this insomnia thing happened and the way that it affected my well-being, it definitely made me feel like I wanted to speak and tell people about my experience. You know what I mean? Like, not even in a way it's like, oh, I want to like inspire people. It's like, it's not even that. It's just like, I just felt like I wanted to share it, you know? Because I know that on my own time, I'm always watching interviews. I'm constantly watching people on YouTube, hearing about people. I'm curious about people's lives, people who are artists, people who are actors, anyone. Like, anyone, any job, I don't care. I'm so curious about people's lives and like what they're experiencing and what they go through, because I feel like so many people are like, I'm great, I'm doing well, but like they don't, like no one, and then it creates this like facade that like the majority of the world is just not struggling and everyone's fine. But it's like I just felt like it was important for me to share my experience in that way.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your sort of trademark, the light up glasses that you wear, that look like kind of spinning records. Can you tell me the story behind them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it goes back to me feeling hypnotized by music that I really loved at like an early age, and how I wanted to sort of encapsulate that feeling of feeling hypnotized by music within my own sort of branding and style. So I wanted to like create these hypnotic glasses to kind of further express that, you know? Like I love the concept and the idea of being hypnotized by music. I think it's like just a very cool thing, and I think a lot of people do experience that feeling when they're like at events, like especially particularly dance music, I believe, or well, tons of music could be that way.
No, but in
I
particular, dance music is trance-like. It's hypnotic. It really is.
exact
Yeah, it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
it is like definitely just like leaves you in this like entranced state
Yeah.
sometimes. And I really felt like the pace of the style of music I make and have always wanted to make, especially at an early age, was very indicative of that. And I wanted to then create like I wanted everything to be that. Like not just music. I wanted to like look the part. I wanted my visuals to have the part, you know what I mean? Like that's basically where that came from. And I always think I can't believe no one did that before me. I always think that's crazy. I'm like, how did no one come up with like the hypnotic glasses? I think it's such a strong idea, you know?
We've been looking forward to talking to you for so long. I think you really like represent like another generation of like Canadian artists that have like really succeeded all around the world. And it's really amazing to see what you did, and it's so well deserved, everything that's kind of been coming your way. So, and thanks for being so open about everything you've been going through too, because it's nice to see the human side of all this, like fame and success and money and all that. So I really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate being here as well. And you're a very great interviewer. So thank you.
Well, you're a great DJ, so we're good. If you ever need a banjo player, I'm very affordable. Rezz is a DJ and record producer from Niagara Falls, Ontario. She just launched a new record label called Hypnovision, and her latest album is called Nightmare on Rezz Street 2.